Good day. Dr. Michael Fisher, fearologist, speaking today on No King's Day. My wife and I will be attending the local No King's Day, actually called No Tyrant's Day in Canada, but in parallel with obviously the No King's Day, which is a revolt, a revolution, a soft way of getting out in the streets and basically saying no to the authoritarianism of populist governments, of fascist governments, totalitarian governments, all the kinds of abusive uses of power that have gone into governments and other bodies that have been utilized to basically suppress, oppress, and eliminate all kinds of human beings, especially with those who show their voice. So we'll go out, and I'm not typically someone who goes to these rallies. I have gone to rallies throughout my life and as my back to my 20s, but I typically always like to change the title of the marches, the rallies, in my own way as a fearologist, as someone who thinks very deeply and has for decades about the nature and role of fear in society and fearlessness. So let me just start that intro with the follow up that really, to me, it's a no fear day. And I would really like you all to think about that, whether you go to the rally per se and whether you think you need to be at the rally or not. Whatever your opinion and view is on rallies, yeah, I too have my doubts about the effectiveness. But what I do know is that no King's Day is no fear day. It's just another language. It's the language of the time. It's probably pretty good for gathering a universal, right, left, right, centrist perspective. A lot of people, whatever wing of politics you are in, do not want authoritarianism and the destruction of democracy. Now, that said, let's not just get out to these rallies, is my point, and just speak about Trump, about this leader, about how we all deserve a voice, we all have a right. And then, of course, there'll be people wanting to talk about the eco crisis on the open mic. There'll be lots of people on the open mic that we're going to are going to want to talk about Gaza and whatever it is. And this is again going to be the fragmentation that will happen once you open up people to bring their flags, their signs. And of course, they're all welcome. I'm an inclusion type of guy. But what I'm really seeing is the destructiveness over the last 50 years of my watching activism, where it's basically become so fragmented in all to these specialty, what are called new social movements and or issues movements. And what's ended up happening is we're losing the larger left progressive, really powerful coalitions. I'm not the only one talking about coalitions. So today, as you go, another way to coalesce as humans is not only anti the king, the tyrant, but anti, quote, fear ruling. And that's what is the deep motivation, isn't it? It is the deepest motivation of how a tyrant, a king, these authoritarian government regimes, and not just governments, but other kinds of organizations that use fear mongering against us and to get their way, to organize their Machiavellian type power and structures and economies and politics and armies, right? They're creating fear. Military are moving into cities. What do you think that's all about? Terrify the people. So they will do your will, or at least they'll shut up and stay in their homes. So Trump, example, is going to do everything he can today, perhaps even instituting the Insurrection Act, apparently, right? And it's basically he's saying, I have a right to use fear against the people, and I will do so to control them, to think my way, or at least to shut them up or ship them out if they don't agree. All about fear. Fear is the deep motivation behind all of what's going on today. I ask you to think about that. So back to the coalition fragmentation, which I think is the other major problem of why the progressivists, the thinkers, whether you're secular or spiritual, why we have not built a substantive coalition. And that is why the extreme right, per se, has actually taken over in the US government. It will take over parts of Canada as well. It already is, and it will continue as we're influenced by the United States continually. So the challenge is think about No Fear Day and think about No Coalition Day. Well, the coalition will be very temporary today and in this weekend, right? Different groups getting together and sort of for the same cause. But if you do not shift, if we're not capable of shifting as progressivists, as people who really care and love this planet, and love the freedom that we all have gained in hard ways, more or less, some more than less. That if we don't care about the coalitions, the building of a real synergetic power of a unified movement, we need to get our best leaders all getting together and talk and join and connect and organize to build coalitions. And as I say, the last 50 years, I've seen the continual pluralistic, extreme pluralism of postmodernism firing off everybody becoming super specialists, hyper specialists, celebrities, leaders. And I don't see them getting together near enough and talking. So this morning, as I close this video, I have a coalition of 4 major leaders that ought to be together, and they're not. And they are all Jewish, interestingly enough. That's not necessarily the point, but they all study and care about fear in some way. They've made it in their writings. And as a fearologist, I've found this literature over the last many decades of searching. It's Marianne Williamson, Michael Lerner, Starhawk, and Bracha L. Ettinger. These are major theorists, as I say, with a Jewish background and or Jewish in some way, more spiritual and or more secular, doesn't really matter. They all have a certain spiritual bent to them, the ones I've listed. And they are not getting together, which is astounding to me. They are not talking of and collaborating with their theories, their philosophies, their publications, and getting out in panels. Why not, people? This is ridiculous. You could have a huge following and you would bring a great intelligence from these 4 people. And again, slightly different perspectives, but with the common ground of a no fear society, which is a society of fearlessness, if you want to put it in a more positive way, which, if you want to make it really positive, it would be living in a love based society under a politics of fear, an economics of fear, a social environment and psychology of fear, and education of fearlessness. I meant love. So rather than fear based. So I'm not saying fear is all bad. So that's another conversation. The coalition building, the no fear day concept, and what that can unify. And I wish you the best as you're out there. If you are on the outside externally, or if you are on the inside supporting in spirit, those who are out on the lines, the front lines, standing up in mics, and yeah, you could be attacked, you could be shot, and you may be gathered and put in prison, whatever. We don't know what's going to happen today. But regardless of what happens, I've given you 2 things to really think about deeply on this No Fear Day, No King's Day. And just to remember, No Fear started as a movement, a social movement, back in just 1999 or so. And that is documented historically with what eventually became not so much a political movement, but it was a no fear exclamation mark movement of rebellious youth, particularly, and that became the No Fear logo on a lot of hats, coats, t-shirts back in that time. So it's been around. I'm glad it's coming back in another form. But as I said, we have to go beyond that to building coalitions. And that's where these leaders have to get over their differences and their unique followerships and say, no, we want us all to get together. Like no more just following me, the guru, the spiritual, you know, divine and or the leader of this movement. Movement by itself split. That's killing the progressive. That's why we're losing. That's why we've lost. And that's why fascism, for example, is taking over. Look forward to your comments on this today and have a good one out there or in there, in spirit, spirit of fearlessness.